Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So simple.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 550 for September 5th, 2023, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us this weekend, everybody. It is the fall movie season. I'm so excited.
Yeah, because summer solstice rules don't apply. It is officially fall. Yeah, summer's done. Summer's done.
This is my favorite time of year. Fall and into early winter is just the best.
Is this your favorite
absolutely my
season,
favorite.
fall?
Oh, yeah, by far. Absolutely,
Okay.
by far. This is the time of year, like right around now, and this will carry through December. This is when I get the most homesick. I currently live in South Florida, for those that don't know, but I am originally from Michigan. And if you do the math there, Michigan has 4 seasons. South Florida has 1. It is the summer all the goddamn time. And it never stops.
That's what someone tried to tell me when I lived in Milwaukee right after graduating college, was that there are only 2 seasons, winter and July. And when I lived there, it was not like that. It was there were definitely more arcing 4 seasons than that was, described as. But I can understand why you're homesick, especially, your number 2 Wolverines. They had a good weekend.
Yeah. No, it was a fun weekend in the football world.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Not just for me, but my wife is a Florida State Seminole.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, do they look real dangerous.
That was violent.
They are going to be real good.
Yeah.
But, that's for another time. We'll start in
yeah.
session sports down the road here. But yeah, no, this is my favorite time of the year, where it's still hot in Michigan as it is in most parts of the country. But soon it'll start to cool down. The leaves will change colors and will start to fall. And I absolutely love that. And then even when you start to get those early snows in November and December, being a hockey guy, again, I am.
Yeah.
For the longtime listeners, you'll know I'm a big hockey guy. So I love winter more than most people do. I especially love fall. And while I growing up, you always admire summer because it's cold for 5 months out of the year. And so by the time it gets to May and June, you are ready for those summer months and you embrace them and you have a lot of fun. In South Florida, it is that all the time. And to me, it is so overwhelming.
Well, it's also the
overwhelming.
mentality of growing up, right? We always associated summer as summer vacation. That's the time you're off. But then when you get older, you realize that means nothing when you're an adult. You don't get summers
There's
off
no
unless
summer
you work in the
vacation
education
of work.
system.
Absolutely.
But I'm with you. I think fall is also my favorite season for similar reasons that you're talking about. But it's just the vibe, man. It's just the vibe.
I mean, there's the cooler weather in most places that's not Florida. That I love. So yeah, the vibe that comes with fall, as you're talking about, absolutely love that. Perfect coffee drinking weather. I'm a coffee addict, so
it's
love
relaxing.
that.
Yeah, I just like the coloration. The
Yes.
Halloween and Thanksgiving are probably
yes.
2 of my favorite holidays.
Absolutely,
yeah,
completely agree.
Oktoberfests, just like that whole like
It's
all
just the
foliage.
best.
There's something relaxing about it. I remember having a conversation with my dad about this, just about seasons in general. I think we were talking about beer and how we both love Oktoberfest style beers. And I asked him, so your favorite season is fall, right? He goes, oh no, that's my least favorite season. I go, oh, why is that? He said, it's when things die. It's like, wow, that kind of makes
fair,
sense,
I
but
guess,
that's morbid.
I mean, October is all about horror and death. So, I mean, I guess I do kind of understand that perspective, but I'm with you. I love the foliage. I love the coloration. Halloween is a lot of fun. Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. So I really love the fall. Also, again, circling it back to sports, football, begins in the fall. Hockey starts around the corner as well.
Yeah.
For those that like basketball, the NBA will pick up here soon as well. So, there's just a lot going on this season. And also, it's the heaviest time of year for movies. Like the fall movie season is when we really start to get a lot of these major players, these contenders for either awards or our own personal top 10s. And, we've talked about that countless times over the years.
For sure.
Sometimes these years will start off a little slow. The spring usually will sprinkle in a few. The summer will maybe add a few more. But by the time you get to the fall season, you get so many heavy hitters that you're just watching greatness one after another a lot of the time. And so it's just the best. And I'm very excited to get into the fall season, even though this year we've seen some pretty great films already that will absolutely land on our personal top 10s. I imagine there'll be major awards players as well.
I mean, when you make $1 billion, you can't really ignore it, right?
Yeah. And when you have one that is a 3-hour talkie movie that
is about to become $1 billion.
Yeah. No, those will be major awards players for sure. But the fall looks like it's going to have some incredible movies that we're going to get to experience and talk about over these next few months. And so we figured now is a great time to talk about the fall movie season, offer up a little preview, and get into what we are looking forward to in the fall / early winter season here as we end out 2023.
Yep. Now, and this is good timing because as we're recording this, we've been hearing a lot of rumblings on potentially new upcoming Oscar contenders. What with Venice happening, the Venice Film Festival. I think it's Telluride is also happening. Then TIFF happens not too long after we're recording this.
Like next week, I believe, right?
Yeah. So and not only that, we're already seeing reviews and aggregated scores for a lot of these upcoming movies that we're going to talk about. And a lot of them look pretty promising, to say the least. And not to say that we're surprised by that, because for some of these, we're not surprised at all. But just hearing that, I don't want to say confirmation, because everyone has their own taste. Everyone's going to react differently to these, ourselves included. But when there's a consistent response that seems to suggest this is going to be an important film to catch up on, that just adds to the excitement for sure.
Absolutely. So with all of that laid out, let's get to this. And while we are talking about these movies that will end 2023, we will actually begin this conversation by time traveling back to
going back
January.
To the beginning.
We're going back to the beginning.
We're going to Christopher Nolan this.
Yes. Because back in January, we did our top 10 most anticipated movies of 2023. Let's talk about that briefly with how it lines up with the movies that are coming out this fall and what we're looking forward to. So here is my top 10 that I laid out back in January. Some of these have already come out. Some of these will be among the crop of films that we get into here. So at number 1 for me, Kelly Reichardt's Showing Up. I still really like that movie.
Yeah, it's good.
Number 2, Jeff Nichols' The Bike Riders. Number 3, Joshua Oppenheimer's The End, which I don't think is coming out this year.
Yeah.
Number 4 is The Zone of Interest. Number 5 was Barbie. 6 was Peter Pan and Wendy. 7, Dune Part 2. Let's take a moment of silence as we remember Dune Part 2. Okay, thanks everybody for that moment
I literally
of silence.
bowed my head like I would at church.
At number 8 for me was Monster. At number 9, Magic Mike's Last Dance. And at number 10 for me was Muriel Heller's Night Bitch. Brendan, before we get into the fall season, and I have some questions based off of my own top 10, but perhaps with yours as well. But what was your top 10 back in January?
So let's see. I want to make sure I have the right list. Okay, this is our list from January 17th, 2023. This was episode 517 that we did this episode.
Yes.
If we're going from number 1 to number 10, my most anticipated is a film that is still coming out, but it has a new title, and that is Hayao Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron. At the time, was called How Do You Live?
Yes.
At number 2 was Hirokazu Koreeda's Monster, which I hope is still coming out this year. I think it is, but this is one that could potentially straddle the line a little bit, right?
Yes.
Number 3, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Disappointed by that one. Number 4, Peter Pan and Wendy, David Lowery.
Yeah.
Liked it, didn't love it. Creed 3, liked it, didn't love it. So I really hope this is not becoming a trend with what I'm looking forward to for the rest of the year. I did allude to the fact that some of these movies that we will talk about have been getting some pretty stellar reviews and some potential Oscar buzz. I did not expect that from the new film by Yorgos Lanthimos, Poor Things. That was my number 6 here. At number 7, Sean Durkin's latest film, The Iron Claw, which I believe is also still coming out this year. Not too sure about
still
that.
Coming out, yeah.
Yeah, this is probably going to be one of those late bloomers, I think. Number 8 was Night Bitch, the Marielle Heller film. And I guess by no coincidence at all, my number 9 and 10 were Barbie and Oppenheimer.
Look at that.
I apparently indirectly predicted Barbenheimer before it became a thing.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I had Barbie on my list. I did not put Oppenheimer really because it's Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
And I simply wanted to put some other stuff there. So a couple of notes about my list.
Yeah.
Jeff Nichols, The Bike Riders. This was technically the second time it had made that list for me because I had it at number 3 for 2021.
I was going to say,
2 years ago.
I was about to say, wasn't it on your list more than twice? But
yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
21, it was my number 3 of that year. It obviously did not come out in 2021 or 2022. So here we are a few years later. Not quite the 4-year gap that was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Right.
But still a good solid 2 years. And similarly, Zone of Interest was my number 7 for 2021. So that's also been on my list for 2 years. And I recycled that as well. And I had that at number 4 on this year's list.
Yeah, Jonathan
because
Glazer.
We knew both of those. In January, we were very confident both of those would come out. And we know for sure that both of them are coming out this year.
And hearing good things about both of them, especially the Zone of Interest. I mean, if I'm not mistaken right now, it might be among, if not the best reviewed movie of the year thus far, at least based on those who have seen it. I don't know. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And I do want to get to that here in a second. As it relates to my list, though, and I believe yours as well because this is on it. Marielle Heller's Night Bitch. Is that still coming out?
I hope so.
Is that happening?
I hope so.
I haven't really heard anything.
That just sounds so interesting. But you're right. I haven't heard any plans for it as of yet.
Yeah.
Because normally
it hasn't been at any film festival. You think it would be at one of these festivals if it was coming out this year. I don't believe it's played.
Yeah, and normally we at least hear where it's going to premiere by this point, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's what I feel like we haven't been notified of yet. Absolutely.
Looking at here for Koreeda's Monster. So it was something that played over at Cannes.
Yes.
Back in May. It did play there. It did have a Japan release over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
According to IMDb, there currently is nothing here for a United States release.
Well, I feel like this is kind of a trend, at least with Asian films, Japanese films in particular, that the year that it premieres at Cannes is the same year that it will premiere and release in its own country, which means it comes to the States next year. So I'm kind of thinking Monster is going to end up being a 2024 film.
2024. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's typically how it plays. I do think, though, when Shoplifters came out, that played at Cannes, but then also was released later that same fall.
I think that one was rushed because of how successful it was at Cannes. There was this real push for it to be a potential end of the year contender in its own
keep
way.
that momentum going. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Coretta, we love him. We got to experience his beautifulness last year.
Broker's great. Broker
It's
is
very
really good.
I love it. And I think we're being selfish, Brendan, by thinking that we would get 2 in a row.
I know. We shouldn't have
Like,
been that optimistic, I guess.
Shouldn't have been. So we'll get more of our beloved Coretta next year, it seems.
Yeah.
All right. So as we get into the movies that are coming out this fall, and perhaps there will be some more questions as we go, but most of the films on my list, I know that we are getting this fall.
Yeah.
The film I need to start with, though, Jeff Nichols, The Bike Riders.
Hearing
Oh,
good
my
things.
beloved Jeff Nichols. I have to apologize here up at the top. I will be incredibly grating when it comes to this movie. I will be talking about it nonstop, especially if I end up loving it. I'm probably going to be annoying, and I apologize in advance. I love Jeff Nichols. To me, he's one of the great American filmmakers, wholly underrated, and maybe it's because he's only made a handful of films, but
Yeah.
he's far from being a household name. Even in cinephile circles, he's not talked about really all that much, which is why it is my goal to champion him at
his
every
films,
turn.
by comparison with some big films, his films are a little mild, and that's not to say that they shouldn't be talked about, but I can see why maybe they get a little lost in the shuffle, especially when there are more vibrant and colorful films that come out each year that maybe kind of mask it, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, he's all about examining that blue collar middle America aesthetic and sensibility. So yes, he's not going to be making a Yorgos Lanthimos film anytime soon.
No.
Or a Martin
Daniel's
Scorsese.
film.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not his sensibility. And as I noted earlier, I come from Michigan. I come from middle America. I come from that blue collar sensibility. So maybe that is a part of it. I don't really know.
I get it. I get it. I mean, Berks County, Pennsylvania was like that where I grew up too. It was blue collar in a way, but it was very rural as well. A lot of farmland around. It was very much the commonplace for us.
Absolutely. And the way he examines family dynamic in the middle of all of that, I think is at times quite profound, especially with Midnight Special and Take Shelter. But I think Loving is extraordinary as well. And that's where a lot of people might know him from, because Loving did get a little bit of awards love that year. And now here he is with The Bike Riders. And this is a film that just premiered at Telluride and Venice, or just Telluride. I'm trying to recall.
I forget.
But
It's one of the two at the very least.
Yeah, it just had one of its premieres. It might have been Telluride now that I'm thinking about it. But this stars Austin Butler, Jodie Comer, Tom Hardy, Michael Shannon. Of course, it is obligatory when Jeff Nichols is making
in his contract.
Michael Shannon is in it. Mike Feist is in this as well, among others, Boyd Holbrook. So it has a really great cast.
Yeah.
And, it was really endearing. I don't know if you saw the video or not, but Jeff Nichols was out at Telluride introducing this film. And maybe this is how it comes off in the video, and from his perspective, maybe I'm making this up. I don't know. But in the video anyway, it seemed like he walked on stage and was quite nervous, and his voice was a little bit shaky, and you could see that he was just trying to get through this as quickly as possible
It's been
so
a while.
he could walk off
What
stage.
it's like to make a movie.
And maybe he's not a give a speech on a stage kind of guy. And I totally understand that. And given his movies, that tracks, that makes sense that he's not that kind of guy. And this is a movie where he talked about, I saw these photos of this bicycle gang. They looked really cool and awesome. And I just wanted to evoke that in film form, basically.
That just makes it sound like the movie's going to be a vibe. Which
it's going to be a vibe bike riding movie. Yeah.
He's going to channel his own Easy Rider, I guess.
Yeah. More or less is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And that to me sounds incredible, especially within the way that Jeff Nichols likes to shoot and make his movies. Because the one criticism that I have seen of the film is that, look, this isn't going to be winning any Oscars for a screenplay. And that
makes it sound awesome.
To me, that what made it all the more alluring, because it's like, okay, there's going to be a thin narrative here, which to me means this is all about looking cool. It's all about these characters evoking something on screen. So it's going to be a visual storytelling kind of movie, and it's going to be all about these performances. And David Wingo doing a score for this movie. Oh my God. That has me extremely excited. So The Bike Riders, man, it's easily not even close the film I'm looking forward to the most.
And I didn't have it on my list because I just didn't know much about it at that time. And when I do these initial anticipated lists in January, I tend to reserve that list for movies that I feel like I know enough about, outside of just like some of the cast and the director making it. But knowing even more about that vibe, I would probably give it even more of an edge, because that just sounds like such a reawakening for someone like Jeff Nichols, who has been sort of out of the spotlight for a few years. And when that happens, it usually means that they're going to come back with a new energy, not necessarily a better energy, just a new energy, as if it's almost like a reintroduction for us of sorts. And that sounds exciting there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back in January, I didn't know anything about it either, but it's Jeff
You just knew it was Jeff Nichols. And sometimes, sometimes you have
these
these relationships with certain filmmakers. It's like, I don't need to know anything as long as I just know who's making it and who's going to be in it. And that's fair. That's fair.
Absolutely. So to me, that is the film I'm looking forward to the most, just on that alone. And then they announced this cast. And the one thing that has been somewhat lost in this, because I just keep talking about how much I love Jeff Nichols and his film speaks so profoundly to me. And we talked about Michael Shannon and their relationship, and Austin Butler is getting a lot of notoriety coming off the heels of Elvis, and people are really taking to him and his, we'll say, aesthetics. People really love the way he looks on camera, and I don't blame them. This also has Tom Hardy, and Tom Hardy is one of my favorites. And the one thing that I read about Tom Hardy in this film is that he gives maybe the best performance in a decade. I don't know how true that is, but that also gets me excited, because I think we somewhat forget that Tom Hardy is also in this. And if he is giving the best performance he's done in a decade in a Jeff Nichols film, are you kidding me?
I'm just imagining that we always talk about how he's so great in movies when you don't even see his full face. Is he going to be wearing like a bandana or something around his face for most of it?
Just talking through. I'm Tom Hardy talking like this the whole time. I don't know.
I'm the Spike's Reckoning.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. All right, so that's my list. That's number one. What is number one on your list for the fall?
For the fall, for
the fall.
So I guess updated list. Thinking about this now, let me pull up my trusted list. I actually have this listed alphabetically. I decided not to really rank it this time.
I haven't ranked mine either. That's
okay.
That's The Bike Riders is my number one, because it was inevitably always going to be my most anticipated, unless Showing Up came out in the fall, but I knew that was coming out in the spring. So, it's Jeff Nichols. The rest of these I don't have ordered at all.
Yeah, if I had to give a number, it's hard. I don't know if I really have a number one. I guess by default, I might go to Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things, because let's talk about that. Well, yeah, I guess we'll talk about that first, because it was on my most anticipated back in January. And it's one of those that seems to be living up to the potential hype more so than pretty much anything on my list outside of the whole, Barbenheimer phase, right?
Yeah.
But Poor Things is the new film from Yorgos Lanthimos. It's him working with screenwriter Tony McNamara again, working together once again after The Favorite, which was a very big hit at that time when it came out in 2018, I think it was. I have not read the novel that this is based on by Alistair Gray, I believe the author's name is, as far as how you pronounce that, but it stars Emma Stone, working with Lanthimos once again, this time featuring Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe, a few others as well, and is basically sounds like a very sexualized version of Frankenstein in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
A woman being brought back to life and apparently goes on this like sexual escapade. I mean, of course it's going to be like that. If this is a Yorgos Lanthimos film, there's going to be some type of fetishism at play here, right? And the fact that this is currently holding a 94% on Metacritic right now.
Wild.
I was thinking maybe somewhere in the high 70s or something like that. I felt like it would be pretty divisive, but
it's one of the best reviewed movies of the year so far.
Yeah, I think that part surprised me. And I don't know if that makes me excited because I tend to like when movies really divide not just audiences, but critics as well. But the fact that early critics who got to see this now are all really going for it, it must just be speaking to all of them in their own way, because we know that Yorgos Lanthimos doesn't make safe movies. Just because the movie has a high score like that doesn't mean it's going to be universally accepted, to say the least.
And I do think that's going to be the case in all reality.
Yeah.
I do think once more critics get their hands on this and more people generally are able to see it, I do think we'll see more divisiveness on it because it is Yorgos Lanthimos.
Yeah.
And it's going to be weird and eccentric, and that won't necessarily be for everybody. But I love Yorgos Lanthimos. Everything he does, I think, is done with sublime provocation, and this seems to be his, not only that, but his most sexually I don't even know what the word is. Like, it just seems like it is so beyond what we're used to seeing with him.
So beyond the R rating, apparently, is what I'm hearing. And
yeah, like apparently it's extremely raunchy. And
you could have said that about any one of his other films. So the fact that we're saying that about this new one of his, I mean,
it's wild. And
I'm guessing, the subject matter of what this story is about is probably playing into that a little bit. So that probably just adds maybe a like a grotesque nature to it, which certainly seems to be the case, right? And that just sounds really provocative to me. So
yeah. Well, and the one thing I was interested in once you learn a little bit more about the premise, and this was pre the reviews coming out,
right?
What was this going to be tonally? Now, the trailer certainly gave it away a little bit, but
right.
I think there's a version of this film where it's more dogtooth in execution, where this seems to be more in line of something like The Lobster, where there is this deep richness in terms of lore and premise and idea, but how it comes off is actually quite blistering in its humor while keep maintaining some of that biting drama throughout as well. That seems to be the general consensus on what this film is tonally. Like, I've heard this film is actually really funny. Really, really funny.
Well, that does not surprise me. I mean, Yorgos Lanthimos makes a really funny movie. The Favorite is hilarious. The Favorite is a very funny movie.
The Lobster, I think, is hilarious as well. Like, killing of a sacred deer is probably more in line with Dogtooth, tonally speaking. But his humor is very effective. For
even
me.
Dogtooth is a very funny movie in pockets when it's not really relishing in its themes on sheltered children. Right.
Yes.
If anything, I'd say The Killing of a Sacred Deer is his least quote unquote funny film. And I think that's partially because I don't think that film is as successful as his other ones. That's easily my least favorite of those that I've seen from him. It's the only one of his I don't think really works all that well. And when it does go for comedy, I'm not sure if it fully lands, but every one of his films have this like perverse sense of humor. And when they work, it's you're going to remember it. And that's the best praise I can give it.
Absolutely. And it seems as if that is the defining factor of Poor Things. You will remember this for better or worse.
Yeah.
And
for those who come away different, for those who come away a little offended by it, oh, you poor thing.
Yeah, you poor thing. So we're all looking forward to that. The one thing with Poor Things, and this isn't necessarily an arena that you and I are experts in by any means, but I'm curious what the awards factor will be with a film like Poor Things, because Yorgos Lanthimos his movies don't scream conventional Oscar-y movies. The Favorite obviously did register with the Academy and with award season, at least some aspects of that movie. Does Poor Things follow suit in that regard? And given its raunchy core and again that Lanthimos eccentricity, is that something that he can replicate again? I like the success or failure of Poor Things has nothing to do with that, but I do find it interesting given the history of the Oscars and the award season and what voters typically go for. Lanthimos isn't really the kind of filmmaker that, again, historically speaking,
neither of the Daniels
fit that mold. But neither of the we're living in a new era where I almost feel like that pushback of old Hollywood or old Academy, like since 2016, it's just become such a different animal that I feel like we're getting further and further away from that being a talking point and an excuse. Yeah. Because now it's like, okay, well, these kind of movies do register. Yeah. I mean, we had a movie win Best Picture that where a sequence where you had a talking raccoon on a character's head.
Yeah,
like,
you had a dildo fight.
You're Rakakuni. I mean, we're just in a new age, and so it's an interesting talking point to me. But maybe
even at least with this, well, no, you're right. But even this year, if there is a movie that is going to potentially win Best Picture, that maybe still fits the narrative of what old Hollywood used to give out awards for, it's still a movie like Oppenheimer that is still pushing the envelope and how you can make movies like that, right? Mm-hmm. So there is more of this, I guess, strive for innovation that we see nowadays than we did before, which is exciting. It makes it unpredictable. We can never really tell where it's going to go, because I remember back in the day, like in 2008, 2009, 2010, I could easily predict what movie was probably going to win Best Picture without ever seeing any of the nominees. Like you could just tell by the narrative and the marketing behind it. It was just so loud and egregious for like really two films, right? But that's not really the case anymore, which is really exciting.
I agree. For the sake of moving on, because there's so many other movies to talk about.
Yeah.
Should we bring up Marty Scorsese? I believe a filmmaker that some of you know.
We can talk a little bit about him because, I mean, of course, we're looking forward to Killers of the Flower.
Yeah, this.
I will say the marketing for this film has been pretty wild because we've seen two trailers, and both trailers were so tonally different from one another.
Yes,
like you had one, the initial teaser that made it seem like it almost gave. If we're looking at Scorsese's filmography specifically, it gave me more almost like Shutter Island vibes or like Silence vibes. And then that second full trailer comes out, and I thought, "Is this the Western Wolf of Wall Street?" It had that type of energy that you normally get when, let's say, Scorsese works with Schoonmaker, right? It has that sense of movement to it, and we definitely got that from that second trailer, which was kind of jarring because the subject matter has a seriousness to it that I didn't really expect that same type of Goodfellas-like energy to it. But that honestly makes it more exciting because it makes it seem like a real interesting mesh of tones and genres that only Scorsese could pull off.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm really looking forward to this. Obviously, it's Marty Scorsese. I think what's interesting about the marketing and how Apple is treating this movie, I don't love the posters. That original trailer was quite fantastic, though. However, it does seem, based off of some recent moves, that they are trying to follow the Oppenheimer blueprint here, where I believe they moved this up a couple of weeks and they are expanding its time in IMAX, which to me suggests that they're looking at the Oppenheimer numbers and going, come on, we can do.
Well, this
trajectory, right?
This is potentially dangerous because it depends if it ends up coming out the same weekend as something else. Isn't this potentially now coming to theaters the same weekend as this Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert film? Because if it is, it's done for. And like the Swifties will not allow other people at the theater to see a movie that's not a Taylor Swift film. Like, so
Yeah.
my fiance's maid of honor is a huge Taylor Swift fan. She actually she's kind of a famous Taylor Swift fan. She's people go and see concerts. They try and look for her. Her boyfriend called Swift fans feral. He called them feral. He's not wrong. He is not wrong. And I could totally see them being upset if they run into people at the theater. It's like, you're not seeing a Taylor Swift film? We're going to try and make this Marty Scorsese whatever movie fail.
Well, I don't know if I don't think Apple is trying to compete. I don't think Swifties are going out of their way to destroy Killers of the Flower Moon. Like, I haven't heard anything.
I think they are.
I haven't heard that. To me is ridiculous. I haven't heard anything like that, but I mean, they are certainly dangerous. I would agree with that. And I do think that they'll show up and that film will make more money than it ever probably should. However, I don't think they're actively campaigning to fight against Killers of the Flower Moon. I will say this, though. I think it is a smart strategy. I think them following the Oppenheimer blueprint will give way to the film that is already going to be successful because it's DiCaprio and it's Scorsese.
Right.
And it looks like it's going to have this engrossing narrative behind it. And performances and all of the craft that we come to love with Marty. I think given the year and how this has played out, I could see this maybe not having an Oppenheimer type run because that is just absurdly unprecedented, but I could see this being extremely successful still.
Yeah. How long is this one? This is another lengthy one from Scorsese. I don't think it's quite 3 hours long, but
yeah, I'd have to 206 minutes.
Oh, so it's longer than 3 hours. It's 3.5 hours long.
Yeah, it's long. It's a long one. Yep.
All right. Yep.
Yourself.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Marty ain't playing around with this one.
Oh, man. He had a hit with The Irishman. He's doing that same thing again.
But hey, look, The Irishman did very well considering it was a Netflix film, especially.
Oh, yeah. And a vanity project, according to Netflix now.
And a vanity project. And look, if Oppenheimer has taught us anything, it's that these 3-hour movies can still thrive.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen.
So,
but yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon looks awesome. I think it looks awesome.
It does look great. I think it's going to do very well. It's not going to reach Oppenheimer numbers.
No.
But I do think, and I'm really hoping that it does well and maybe even exceeds the expectations that I'm somewhat diminishing in terms of its of the comparison to Oppenheimer anyway. I really hope that it is more like Oppenheimer because then I don't think there's any argument at all that what people are salivating for is it's not the sequels and the reboots and the remakes. People are tired of that. We want more of this in theaters.
Yeah.
You know, Scorsese.
We want movies. We want movies.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like The Irishman came out in 2019, right?
Yes.
It was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, and that film still did fairly well. It's Scorsese. Scorsese will always do well. But we talked quite often this summer that in a post-pandemic world, it does seem, potentially anyway, that the taste might be changing slightly.
Yeah.
And Barbenheimer is certainly indicative of that. And if Killers of the Flower Moon goes off to do, I don't know, I'll throw out a number vaguely, $600 million worldwide. I mean, it's going to drop on Apple at some point. So I might be grossly overestimating, but.
What if Poor Things becomes a $1 billion movie?
Could you imagine? Could you imagine?
Just wait for the Twilight Zone theme song to start playing if that were to happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Speaking of Poor Things, though, because there's been a lot of conversation about sex in movies. People don't want it. Some audiences don't want it. I shouldn't say people vaguely, because a lot of us do like sex in movies, but it does seem as if some of these filmmakers have taken that criticism personally. Yorgos Lanthimos being one of them. There are two others that are coming out that seem to be quite provocative in their own right, and that is All of Us Strangers and Saltburn coming out this fall as well. Any thoughts on those two movies?
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to one more than the other. The one that I'm really looking forward to is All of Us Strangers, and it's honestly because I just didn't really know much about it going in. I aside from being the new film by Andrew Haig, is that how you pronounce his name? Haig. I honestly, I honestly don't know. I'm so apologetic for mispronouncing these names, as I'm sure that I am, but the fantastical concept of this one, the fact that it deals with parental memory in its own way while still having, the sexual conversation that we can still talk about. That concept just intrigues me way more than what Saltburn is getting at. And admittedly, I wasn't the biggest fan of Promising Young Woman, Emerald Fennell's debut film, or the film that she made before that one at the very least. I'm still interested in seeing what she's going to do with Saltburn, because I thought from a marketing standpoint, it looks really provocative and interesting, looks really entertaining. The cast looks awesome. So I'm looking forward to it in that regard. But between the two, All of Us Strangers just conceptually seems to be way more up my wheelhouse. It seems like it's going to have more of a tender quality that I respond to more. But Saltburn looks like a lot of fun, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's the right word I can use for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very fair. I'm with you. I didn't love A Promising Young Woman either. That film ended up being a little bit divisive. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I did appreciate a lot of what she brought to it as a filmmaker. I think the craft was very much there. The performances I loved. I just think that the storytelling slipped away at times, and I really didn't like some of those very major contrivances that we got near the third act. That said, I did find her, all pun intended, to be a promising filmmaker. And I think Saltburn looks really quite interesting. It's got this remarkable cast to it. And yeah, I mean, it looks incredibly enticing in terms of its visual appeal. It's very evocative and lush in terms of the cinematography behind it. And I believe, that was Linus Sandgren doing the cinematography there. People have been talking about that.
Yep.
And, because that's been a lot of the talk coming out of the festival screenings of this is, the performances are great. Fennell's direction is very good, and it's one of the best shot films of the year. And you certainly see that in the marketing for Saltburn as well. So, which I've really quite loved. So, I do think there is a ton of potential with Saltburn, and it does look like it's something that I could very much respond to. As it relates to All of Us Strangers, I do agree with you. Of the two films, that's probably the one I'm a little bit higher on. It does have this intriguing premise, as you're talking about. It's got Andrew Scott, my boy Paul Mescal. Cannot wait to see what he brings to this. Claire Foy is in the film as well. And equally, it seems to have this titillating, provocative allure to it as well, where people have been talking about how that is really engaging in this movie. And generally speaking, I feel more confident with Andrew High. I haven't seen all of his movies, but 45 Years was one
really
of the best
good.
films of 2015.
Really good.
I really liked Lean on Pete.
Same.
And now with All of Us Strangers, it does seem like he's on quite a bit of a roll. And I didn't see Weekend, but I heard that film is really quite good as well. So
well, and I hear a lot of people are saying that All of Us Strangers is his best film yet.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard a lot of that, which, given the trajectory of him over the last decade, I wouldn't be surprised. He seems like he is maturing and just becoming this really complex, engrossing filmmaker that seems to just be, taking all of the little things he does in his movies and just compounding on that on the next one. So I mean,
Right.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
Although Lean on Pete, probably a little bit of a step down from 45 years, but still very good. A director on the whole, I think is really quite wonderful. So
Yeah.
Cowabunga, Brendan. It's Cowabunga time.
Awesome. Wicked.
Yeah, let's talk a little Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
I love pizza.
We reviewed the film a couple of weeks ago. I had a lot of fun. I thought it was quite good.
It's a very good movie.
It was better than it had any right to be. I just love that animated films are moving away from being too dissimilar. I think before the Spider-Verse movies, I think there was maybe a little bit of that going on in the animated realm.
Yeah.
At least with studio films here in the United States.
Definitely dominated by a certain aesthetic, I guess we can say, a
Yeah, I
certain
guess
choice of
that's more or
animation.
less.
But yeah, there definitely seems to be more of an adventurous spirit with animation nowadays, which is really cool.
Absolutely. I love the visual style of Mutant Mayhem. It's different. It's singular. It's its own unique thing. There's also a lot of fun to be had. We talked a lot about how the Turtles are actual teenagers in that movie, which was refreshing for that franchise. There's just a lot of joy to be had with it. And we have 5 digital codes to give away.
How about
5
that?
of them. So 1 for every Turtle and Splinter.
Yep. Can't forget
So
the
it's
good
perfect.
dad. Yeah.
You got to have the good dad.
The best rat dad.
The best rat dad. Absolutely fighting off the bad guys. You know, he just fantastic in that movie.
Absolutely.
And likes the best Chris.
Yeah,
so there's that
he
as
does.
well. So we have 5 digital codes. If you want to get a digital code for Mutant Mayhem, just follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Be sure to give us a follow. We'll have some instructions later on this week on how you can participate with us, engage with us, and have a chance to win a digital code for Mutant Mayhem, one of the best animated movies of the year right now, directed by Jeff Rowe, written by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg.
Yeah,
among
that's
others.
Seth Rogen and Evan
That's Seth
Goldberg
Rogen.
making a movie distributed by Nickelodeon.
Absolutely. What's not to love? So Mutant Mayhem, 5 digital codes. Follow us on social media for your chance to win one of those digital codes this week.
Cowabunga.
Brendan, the InSession Film Store. It
I like
is
that. I like that.
incredible.
I like that. I've got a couple shirts myself. Why am I not wearing them? What's wrong with me?
I don't know. You got to represent, man. We're on camera now.
Yeah,
not just
I
audio.
like to add myself to this sometimes rather than just market our brand when we've got InSession Film plastered everywhere.
Yeah.
You're doing such a great job wearing it. You look like a freaking model. I can't
Thanks.
compete with that.
Like that's what I got to do. I got to represent on here.
Yeah.
I love our stuff. You know, you can
great stuff.
find we got t-shirts, we got sweatshirts, which is what I'm wearing for this episode. We got all kinds of fun things, and now we've been adding to the store in terms of what you can buy. We have like a Women in Session line that you can go and check out as well if you want to get the Women in Session logo. We have InSession Film with the Star Wars font, if that's something that you want to do. I'm experimenting with a Midnight Special shirt.
Of course
And
you are.
If you're listening to this, I need you to tell me if this is something you want, because I've been thinking about this for a long time.
It's something I want. It's something we want.
Yeah.
So, but of course, our listeners, our viewers out there, it's your call. It's your call.
If this is something you want, I will absolutely make this happen. So please let me know, but I'm working on that. But you get right now on the store, you can also get hashtag JD tiers. That's something that is available as well. We also have InSession Film Barbie font.
Yeah.
That you can go and check out. That is all there. You can either go to tpublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. But the easiest way is to just go to our website, InSessionFilm.com/store.
Yep.
And you'll see all of the items available there. Again, that's InSessionFilm.com/store. Or if you want to head over to TeePublic, again, that's TeePublic.com/ patreon.com/stores/InSessionFilm. It's a great way to help us out.
Yeah.
You'll look great when you're going to the movies, or you're going to weddings or a family reunion.
I know we do have
or
some
to
ties,
hockey
right?
games.
We do have some
we got
ties. Yeah,
ties. There's
you're gonna wear that
mugs,
tie to
there's
my wedding,
stickers.
aren't you?
I should. I need to get one. I have an InSession Film mug, like coffee mug that I have as well.
Okay, you might sneak like your little drink of choice in there. I see what you're
maybe.
doing.
But there's all kind. Yeah, there's not. I'm glad you bring that up though, because there's not even. It's more than just shirts.
Yeah.
And sweatshirts. There's all kinds of items up there that you can go.
Yeah.
And check out. So again, InSessionFilm.com/store. Go check it out. It's a great way to help us out while looking great this fall season.
Absolutely.
Priscilla, Sofia Coppola.
Looks awesome.
Looks great, right?
Looks haunting. Looks like a psychodrama. Looks like
Absolutely.
a Sofia Coppola film. It's actually like she has different tonal avenues sometimes. Sometimes it's maybe something like an On the Rocks, for instance, which maybe kind of falls in line with movies like The Bling Ring or Somewhere. But Priscilla reminds me way more of something like The Virgin Suicides. And that might, or even something like The Beguiled as well. And I tend to respond more to that side of her because her movies almost have like this horror-like quality to it without actually being horror movies. The Virgin Suicides is one of those movies I say is secretly a horror film. It just doesn't come out and tell you that it is. And I'm kind of getting similar vibes, at least from the marketing with Priscilla. And you and I have been pretty big fans of Kaylee Spaney for some time, at least the small amount of films that we've seen her in thus far. She has always made an impact and been hearing great things about her. Apparently the best actress race this year is going to be a really stiff competition, and she's just adding to that competition.
Yeah, that does seem like a really stacked category at the moment. I'm always looking forward to a Sofia Coppola. On the Rocks wasn't one of her best films. I really liked it though. I thought it was charming and funny, and
I liked it. I was mixed mostly, but definitely still I was on the positive end, wavering thumbs up.
Absolutely. And because a lot of the conversation that I've seen on this film, aside from what you've been talking about and in terms of the film itself, but the major consensus seems to be this is her best film since Lost in Translation. And that might be true. This does look like it's going to be quite great. However, while that might be true, I do want to be crystal clear on this. I will not stand for the Beguiled erasure. I'm not going to stand for it.
Beguiled
that film
rules.
is excellent. It rules. It's one of the best films of 2017. So this film, Priscilla might be her best film since Lost in Translation, but I don't think it'll be that much better than The Beguiled, because I think The Beguiled is quite masterful in its own right, and I don't think it should be forgotten in that specific discourse.
Right.
But as it relates to Priscilla itself, I mean, I'm with you. It does seem like it's going to be tapping into the like those dire qualities that we've seen in her previous films that I just feel like are really engrossing, and the performances seem quite great. There's been unnecessary comparison between this and something like Elvis, which is why I struggle with comparison. Sometimes it is appropriate, and you cannot help yourself.
You cannot compare a Sofia Coppola film with a Baz Luhrmann film.
You can't. It is unnecessary.
That is room for comparison jail right there.
Well, because here's the thing with comparison. When it's done in good faith, it's fine. It is adequate, sometimes necessary. The problem with comparison in terms of film criticism and discourse is that oftentimes comparison is used in bad faith because they are trying to elevate something else.
Or
I
undermine
think this
something
film
else.
is bad because this film over here is great, even though the two films might have nothing to do in common with each other.
I've been seeing things like Jacob Elordi, who plays Elvis in this movie Priscilla. I've seen some things from certain review outlets that said things like his performance is so good because of how bad Austin Butler was in Elvis. And
That's what I'm talking about.
That's what you're talking about. Yeah, it's like, but I mean, obviously we haven't seen Priscilla yet, but I think we can easily assume that
Yeah.
they're going for very different tonal and
Yeah.
character motivational things. It's
Absolutely.
just not, it's not the same thing.
That's 100% what I'm talking about. That is a bad faith argument that is wholly rooted in wanting to elevate this thing over here that I love. When the two really shouldn't be compared at all, because Baz Luhrmann had very different goals in mind. Very different goals.
You might
in
not
mind.
like those goals, and you might not like that performance, but it has nothing to do with how great Priscilla is going to be.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
Priscilla looks like it's going to be excellent. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
What else? Should we talk Richard Linklater? We love him.
Oh, talk Link. Oh man, there's so many we could talk about. You know, there are two that I think we should lump together. You just brought up Linklater, but there are two Hitman movies coming out this year. So why don't we just lump them together? We'll do Richard Linklater's Hitman and then David
and the
Fincher's
killer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I gotta say, I'm looking forward to both, but I never thought I'd be the one to say that of the two, I think I'm more intrigued by the Richard Linklater version.
over. Yeah.
I think I'm just more fascinated by the Glenn Powell effect, if I'm being honest.
He co-wrote that movie too.
Yeah. This just conceptually speaking, it just doesn't sound like a Richard Linklater film. And then after the premiere at Venice, I think it was, I'm hearing that it's one of the funniest films of the year. Like, what? Okay, that just intrigues me more, because based on what we've seen from the marketing and from the early word of mouth with regard to The Killer, yes, we're getting a very thrilling David Fincher killer-esque type movie, okay? That's kind of what we'd expect, right? I bet the movie's going to be awesome. And from what I'm hearing, it's actually one of David Fincher's thematically simplest films, I'm hearing, which honestly makes it sound kind of fun. Like, I kind of like the idea of going into a Fincher film that's almost more of an exercise in his style than anything else. I think that's a nice change of pace for him after something like Mank, for instance.
Yeah, sure.
But I have no idea what to expect with Richard Linklater doing a comedic take on a subject matter like that. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to both, but there's something very fascinating about the latter there, if you ask me.
absolutely. I love when filmmakers get outside their wheelhouse a little bit.
Yeah.
And funny enough, when talking about Richard Linklater, one name that might come to mind is someone like Ethan Hawke. For those that subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/InSessionFilm, you should be able to go check us out there.
Absolutely.
So subscribe, help out the show.
Yeah.
But last week, when we were doing our exclusive Patreon episode, we were talking about 2001 movies.
Yeah.
So we were talking about Training Day. And one of the things that I found so interesting about Training Day on a rewatch, because when people bring up that movie, it's all about Denzel and his performance. And look, it is one of the best loud performances you'll see. He truly is incredible in that movie. Even though Ethan Hawke was nominated for his performance, I feel like that is forgotten because of the Denzel of it all. When that movie is brought up, people don't talk about Ethan Hawke in that movie. You might not even remember that he's in that movie.
Oh, I hope so.
It's all about, I say that facetiously because it's all about Denzel and his performance. And it is one of my favorite Denzel performances. However, what's interesting to me about Ethan Hawke is, like, we don't think of Ethan Hawke conventionally with a movie like Training Day. What we think of is the before movies, right? Or anything that is done with Linklater, really. Like, it's his indie work. It's those kind of smaller films that he engulfs himself in that become what we know him of. Yeah. Mostly. So when he does a Training Day, you're like, this is outside the core of Ethan Hawke, or at least what we tend to know him of. And I feel like this is Linklater doing his Training Day, so to speak, where he's not doing Boyhood. He's not doing the Before trilogy. Like, this is him going outside of his wheelhouse a little bit,
If anything,
the material here.
my expectation, expectation is the wrong word, but if I had to make a prediction of what it might be similar to tonally, maybe something like Bernie.
I guess I keep forgetting about that movie. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so he's done some criminal dealings
Yeah.
with his
This
movies
could be
before.
like a Bernie-esque, and that was a good movie. I
I
really
like
liked it a
Bernie.
lot,
Yeah, I
too.
think it's a fascinating movie. It's really interesting. So maybe it could fall in line with something like that.
Yeah, no, that is a really good point. So, at any rate, it's still not what we tend to think of traditionally with Linklater, and that has me excited. And all I've heard is universal praise for this.
Yeah.
People are loving it, and that makes me very happy.
Mm-hmm.
And as for Fincher, I am completely with you. I'm still looking forward to the film, but have heard that it's maybe a little bit more tepid than what we were anticipating originally. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that David Fincher has to be making,
Manx and Gone Girls and Benjamin
like he doesn't have to be
Buttons
doing Gone Girl every time.
and even
like, it's fine.
even despite the the quote unquote trashiness of something like Gone Girl or his rendition of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, there is still room for nuance and thematic density to those films, right? But perhaps he just wanted to make a movie and have a good time. He just wanted to have fun making a movie, and that makes for a nice change of pace because his style is something we all love. So if he decides to make a movie that's just all about that, that sounds fun to me.
I agree.
I think it sounds interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it could be his version of Inherent Vice. And look, I will admit, Inherent Vice isn't the most polished of PTA's movies, but I think it's great and one of his best movies, even if it is less streamlined than his best work. Maybe The Killer is a version of that where, okay, maybe it has some ripples in it, but it's fun. Michael Fassbender is back. Let's not forget that. We haven't seen Michael Fassbender since 2017, everybody.
We talked about that. Yeah,
it's been a while. 6 years.
Well, I mean, Dark Phoenix, was that 2019?
We're not counting that.
You kind of liked it, though.
I did. No, I did like that. Not because of Fassbender, for other reasons, but yeah, I think that is a little underrated. But either way, we haven't seen the man in a long time, especially if we're looking beyond X-Men movies.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Or a failed attempt like The Snowman, which
I didn't even see.
Yeah, here it's not good. Here it's not good.
Yeah, but I'm so happy to see Fassbender back on screen. Obviously, we're getting him in the Waititi film as well. Yeah, coming out this fall. So we're gonna get 2 Fassbenders. Hopefully, that means the man is back, and we'll get to see more of him because he's one of the best. He just needs a new agent. That's all.
Yeah, he does. He does. Well, he's working with David Fincher. I think that's a step in the right
Fincher's
direction.
great. Absolutely, that's a step in the right direction. And Waititi, outside of the MCU, has been a proven commodity. Jojo Rabbit aside, that's obviously quite divisive, but
it's quite divisive. But at least I feel like that movie was mostly a hit with audiences. And if Next Goal Wins falls into that same category, it's at least going to land with enough people to suggest that the film works enough, right? And that Fassbender is worth saving.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm still very much looking forward to The Killer, even if it didn't have, we'll say, killer reviews. I still think that there's plenty to look forward to with the film. So what else you want to talk about? What else are you looking forward to? Should we talk about Miyazaki? Do we need to mention that here?
I mean, we
it was
can.
on your list.
He was, to be honest, The Boy and the Heron is probably my number one most anticipated film of the fall and winter season. I just didn't talk about it there because I feel like we wanted to focus a little bit more on the excitement of what has been premiering through these festival circuits as of now, such as Telluride and Venice. But we have been hearing, I mean, it's a Miyazaki film. Of course, we're going to hear great things from it, right? I really hope that G-Kids, who have garnered the distribution rights in America, if I'm not mistaken, I really want them to hold true to the whole no marketing thing. Aside from these few images that we've seen, which looks like late period Miyazaki, looks like it came from the exact same mind of someone who just did The Wind Rises. So it has kind of the more like colorful side of it. Looks a little bit more shiny, from an animation standpoint, which looks pretty, to say the least. It's a Studio Ghibli film, so of course it's going to look great. But yeah, I'm of course I'm looking forward to this. We're all looking forward to this. It's going to be.
It's
really
Miyazaki.
It's Miyazaki. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if anything, my only hesitation, and I say this with extreme selfishness, is that I just wish he stayed retired, because The Wind Rises is arguably his best movie.
It's really good.
A masterpiece. And to go out on that note, I think would have been incredible. So
we get to hear more music from Joe Hisaishi. So
but look, more Miyazaki is never a bad thing. Again, removing my selfishness out of the picture, more Ghibli,
watch it end up being the greatest animated movie ever made. Now,
I'd be shocked if it's anything less than great. It'll definitely be good, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yes.
As far as some other films most anticipated, you mentioned that Miyazaki was in your top 10 back in January for most anticipated.
Yeah.
One of those that we haven't mentioned yet that was on my list, might have been on yours as well, Zone of Interest. This film, we've been looking forward to this film for 10 years almost.
Yeah.
More or less. We didn't know what it was going to be originally, but we've been looking forward to this film for quite some time. And by all accounts, it is harrowing, because it's the thing that we've talked about a lot with so many films. It's sometimes the horror is what you don't see.
Yeah.
It's there lingering in the background, pulsating as this vibrant explosion that something horrible is going on, but we don't know. The characters aren't exactly aware of the atrocities happening around them. That seems to be what this film is doing.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, it is nothing short of masterful in that regard.
Well, it's also the perspective that it's choosing to focus on, right? Because isn't this from the perspective of the commandant of Auschwitz, right? So
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of makes you think that it's portraying a very villainous portrayal. But if we know someone like Jonathan Glazer, he's going to challenge that a little bit. At least I would assume that he is. So the choice to have it be that perspective, I think, is already a provocative one. I don't even need to see it. Just that plot synopsis and the historical ramifications of that idea. That's enough to get me in the theater. Really, really provocative.
I mean, Jonathan Glazer is enough to get me in the theater.
That too.
Because the reason he cracked my top 10 in 2021, let alone this year, really was the Jonathan Glazer of it all. Like I mentioned earlier with Jeff Nichols, you simply say the name and I'm going to be there. And then you talk about this very fascinating, complex, engrossing premise that we have here and the perspective of it as we've been talking about. And yeah, everything I've been hearing makes it sound like it is really, really great in that regard. And I imagine the craft will be there. We get another score by Mika Levy in a Glazer film. Really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
The performances, the cinematography, I'm sure all of that will be excellent as well. But yeah, plenty to look forward to as a pseudo horror film of sorts. And I would expect nothing less from Glazer in that regard.
I expect another psychodrama / horror film of sorts that really isn't a horror film until you really peel back the layers, kind of like with Under the Skin. But even Under the Skin that was probably the most literal horror film that Glazer has made as of yet, just given some of that imagery. I don't know. I doubt we'll get very literal, horrific imagery like we did in Under the Skin in this movie, because to your point, it sounds like the horror is going to be what we don't see.
It's the sound design is where the horror lies.
Yeah.
Rather than the black void of Under the Skin.
Yeah. So we'll see if that ends up being the case here as well.
What do you think about Bradley Cooper being behind the camera once again? A Star is Born came out. I really liked it. I didn't love it nearly as much as our beloved Jay Ledbetter did.
Yeah.
However, we've seen the trailer from Maestro. I believe reviews for it have dropped as well.
Mm-hmm.
What are you expecting from this one?
I mean, I thought the trailer was terrible. The trailer did nothing to it. I mean, to be fair, I've actually been talking about trailers on this particular episode in a mostly positive way.
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
There have been some movie trailers this year that have, taken my cynicism away a little bit. Some of them have been doing a pretty good job marketing themselves, but I don't think Maestro was one of them. But I do think this is a fascinating story worth telling, and I don't doubt Bradley Cooper to be the one to do it, at least given his sensibilities with A Star is Born. And we know he's a talented actor as well. So I don't doubt any of those things. Honestly, if there's anything that's going to get me into theater more than anything else, it's Carey Mulligan.
Yes.
That's the one thing there. But to be honest, if I were to rank all of these films just based on my sheer interest / excitement in going to see them, Maestro is admittedly not as high on the list as some of these others that we've already talked about. But I'm still intrigued by it because the early buzz has been that it's really good. It's really I'm honestly not too surprised by that.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised by that as well. I'm really intrigued by Bradley Cooper and his filmmaking because I do think maybe more than anything else, that's what surprised me the most about A Star is Born.
Same.
A few weeks ago we talked about the notion of it's not what a film is about, it's how it's about. A Star is Born, his movie is like the 17th version of it.
Yeah.
And yet it
felt fresh.
It still resonates at a high level because the execution is really quite fantastic. I don't know if the screenplay was as strong to carry it for it to be one of my favorite films of that year, but the performances are great. The chemistry he had with Lady Gaga was fantastic, and his filmmaking was just exquisite.
Yeah,
it was really quite great. So like those were by far the strengths of the movie. So what does he bring to this biopic as a filmmaker? I wonder what sleeves he has or what tricks he has up his sleeves, in that regard.
Yeah.
Because you think of like when I think of A Star is Born in his filmmaking, there are two scenes, and a lot of you probably think of the same two, right? There's or maybe three, because there's the moment in the truck where you turn behind.
Yeah.
Okay. Did not see that coming. The moment in the garage I think is very good, and then the sleight of hand with the editing with that final number.
I agree. There's a jump cut there that is really quite stirring.
Absolutely. It's really well directed beyond that, but those three scenes hit really quite potently, and something that I thought was a nice surprise of that movie. So like what kind of surprises like that does he have in Maestro? That's what I'm really looking forward to, because I know he's going to come as a performer. Carey Mulligan is going to bring it as a performer. We know that. So like how does Maestro distinct itself among all of these other films coming out in the fall? If it does, it's going to come down to Cooper as a director, most likely.
Yeah.
The one caveat there for me, and I don't know, I haven't really done too much reading into the reviews. I've seen some general, instant reaction tweets.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think about the Josh Singer of this. Now, Josh Singer isn't, I wouldn't label him a great screenwriter, but this is someone who, helped write Spotlight and The Post, which are good screenplays. I think they're perfectly adequate. The big one for me is First Man. That to me is an impeccable screenplay that is extremely subversive. And while I don't know anything about Leonard Bernstein, I certainly knew more about Neil Armstrong.
West Side Story, I'll just simply tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was one of his most famous works.
For sure. And that I do know. But like broadly speaking, And now that I'm talking about it out loud, it's like, okay, what did I really know anything about Neil Armstrong other than he went to the moon? You know, because that.
Well, then it doesn't matter.
it's-
Yeah. And
well,
it's
and
tapping into
it's-
the human element as opposed to the accomplishments of that person.
Well, you know, because I was going to say, like, you know, when I think of Leonard Bernstein, yes, there are musical works of his that absolutely come to mind. What I was going to say was outside of some movies or some, you know, some music that he done that I could just name, I don't know anything about the guy.
Yeah.
And I was gonna, and so in comparison, I was like, well, certainly I know more about Neil Armstrong than that. And I was like, but do I? Like, that was running through my mind as I was saying that thought just a minute ago. I was like, I don't know, actually, because part of what makes First Man great is that it really is less about him going to the moon and it's about his home life, which I did not know. Like, so that was that was maybe more on me than the screenwriting, I guess. But I did not anticipate that that's what that movie would be about. So I say that to say, when it comes to the writing here from Cooper and Singer, is it going to be less about his works and more so the human element? And the trailers do seem to suggest that. So that's where there could be some intrigue for me. A lot of words to get there.
Well, and to be fair, movies like The Post and Spotlight, which Singer co-wrote with other people. He didn't solely write those movies like he did First Man. But those prior two movies, Spotlight and The Post, once again, they're more bound by their procedural elements, right? Whereas First Man is not. So if there's more room to play with there, I can imagine that Maestro is more likely going to be, I guess, closer in comparison to something like First Man. That at least would be my guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly fair. So, you know, it's interesting. You come into a conversation thinking one thing, and then mid-conversation, you're like, actually, I don't know if when I came into this, it was true at all. It's just funny how talking things out seems to bring out an honesty. And that's very much what has happened.
Interesting how powerful words can be?
Yeah, because you know, when we were talking about this movie, like I knew I wanted to bring up Josh Singer, but I didn't realize coming into this conversation that I'd be like halfway through my thought, I'd be like, actually, what I was going to say, I don't think I believe anymore. Like in an instant, it was like, actually, I don't think I knew anything about Neil Armstrong outside if he went to the moon. Turns out, like my mind tricked me to think that I did. But that's because
history tells us that.
Because history tells us that. Exactly. It was just the, you know, on the history scale, people know Neil Armstrong more than Leonard Bernstein, but in reality, I don't really
maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. At any rate, anything else? What else is coming out this fall?
We haven't even talked about Michael Mann.
Yeah,
Mann
Ferrari.
himself.
Yeah, that's
Ferrari.
definitely, yep.
Now that was a
Michael
trailer.
Mann.
That was a trailer, if you ask me.
That was a good one. I really liked that one a lot.
Yeah, but this one looks good. I've been hearing some pretty good buzz about this one. But yeah, going back to that trailer, I'm a sucker for teasers that are just free of any kind of dialogue until the right moment, which this one has. And some of those racing sequences I hear are going to be pretty brutal. And you can definitely sense like a tangibility to them just based on the trailer that we saw, right? And a lot of that seems to come into play with the sound and whatnot. And based on the early buzz I'm hearing is that the film is overall very good. It's actually, it might be Michael Mann's best film in quite some time. But that makes it kind of intriguing because movies like Miami Vice or Black Hat, for instance, were not well received at the time, or they were mixed, right? And I know you're not the biggest fan of Miami Vice, but it has slowly garnered a bit of a following, right?
Yeah.
And Black Hat's the same way. That's a film that is being very severely reevaluated now, which is basically my way of saying I don't trust what anyone initially says about a Michael Mann film anymore. I don't.
I think that's very fair. Yeah, because that has, I think, been the intrigue for me. The initial reactions was maybe a little stifled, and much of the reservation seemed to be that it's a little bit cold. and perhaps lacking the vigor that you get with some of Mann's best films. But you're right. That's what they said about Miami Vice. That's what they said about Black Hat. And those two films have been reevaluated over the years. And while I don't wholly love Miami Vice, there's still a lot about that movie I do appreciate. Black Hat is a movie that I have done 100% reversal on.
Yeah.
And that's a movie that I really like now. So, yeah, with Ferrari, the mixed reactions do everything to excite me.
Well, it's not even that. Apparently, this has been a passion project for Michael Mann for some time. I think he's been trying to get this made for like 20 years. I'm trying to recall the screenwriter's name. I have to look this up.
For Ferrari?
Troy Kennedy Martin. That's who it is.
Gotcha.
And this is someone who passed away in 2009. So just for some context, that it's one of those scripts that Michael Mann has been working on, tweaking, making his own.
Okay, so
for
this
quite
is a
some
script
time.
that was written quite a while ago then.
Yeah, and I'm sure the script has gone through alterations in that time, for sure, that Michael Mann may credit himself for. There's another writer that I think is credited on some of those alterations. I can't quite remember who it is.
Okay.
But yeah, the long-winded way of saying that this is something Michael Mann has wanted to make for quite some time.
Yeah, it sounds intriguing. I don't know much about F1. I haven't really followed it, but there are people in my life close to me that do love the sport and talk about the 1950s as being the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
And that death and carnage was just expected, which is kind of insane to me that there was a spectator sport that inherently there was going to be death and it was part of the draw.
Yeah.
That's just wild. Like,
just
people
added
are
to the
nuts.
excitement. It's
People are crazy.
what was this? The Hunger Games with cars, basically.
That's the way they make it sound.
Yeah.
So yeah, when that report came out last week and it was talking about how, there's going to be death and carnage in very graphic ways, with decapitated torsos and whatnot. I was like, okay, that tracks with what I hear about what F1 was in the 1950s. So
yeah.
And Michael Mann, I think those two things to me are very exciting. I think Michael Mann's going to do something exciting with this material.
I think so too.
And it's always prime for me to I love being surprised by these movies because it's a sport that I just don't follow all that often. And, because I think of like Ford v Ferrari was a nice surprise for me in its year. And
Rush.
I didn't really know Rush, obviously.
Yeah.
So this is certainly lining up to maybe be with those. But at the same time, it's Michael Mann. So I'm not expecting this film to be bad or mediocre or average. Like, I'm expecting good things because
I'm
I love
expecting
Michael
to
Mann,
like
so.
it, and then I'm expecting to love it in about 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Ferrari coming out. That looks really good. Another film I wanted to bring up here is The Holdovers. I don't know.
Yeah,
how you
Alexander
feel.
Payne.
Yeah. Alexander Payne, I absolutely adore. Nebraska is my favorite Payne film, and that as much as I love his other works, and I really like Payne on the whole, and maybe I'm in a little bit of a minority there. I don't really know. Either way, it doesn't matter. I think all of his films are very good. Nebraska, though,
Downsizing, the exception.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry,
I pretend that doesn't exist.
Well, that kind of proves the point, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm downsizing my thought on his filmography to
remove downsizing.
Remove that one. Yes, exactly. But his other films I really quite love, and I'm always looking forward to a new Payne. And this seems like it is a massive step up from Downsizing, and people are talking about it. Oh, it's his best movie since Sideways. I've read a lot of that. Again, not going to sit here for the Nebraska erasure, but if this is one of his best movies, then I'm wholly here for it. And Paul Giamatti inside a Payne film, yes, sign me up.
I mean, The Descendants was also quite good, if you ask me as well.
I agree. I liked it a lot.
Nebraska and Sideways are probably my two favorite Alexander Payne films. I have to rewatch Election. That one could be giving those other two a run for its money.
I do like Election.
I think those are at least the top
this
three.
as well, though, and this is the fun thing about doing these retrospectives. I liked About Schmidt more than I remembered when I watched that for last year's retrospective.
I would have been lesser on if it weren't for that ending. That ending
I
really
agree.
makes it.
No, I completely agree. But on the whole, it was better than my memory of it. I'll just say that. Like I ended up liking it way more than I thought I would. And it certainly speaks to the pain of it all, but obviously Nicholson is just fantastic. So
it's a great performance. Yeah.
Really, really great performance. But yeah, that is to say, I've liked all of his movies minus Downsizing, which again doesn't exist.
God, what a bad movie. What a bad movie.
But like he's been hitting so hard over the years that The Holdovers being good is not a surprise at all. And
I agree.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting to me about The Holdovers is that it is only the second film of his that he had no hand in the writing on. Can you take a guess what the first film was?
Yeah, Nebraska.
Which is my favorite. So, like, I'm not against Alexander Payne writing per se, because, again, Sideways is great. The Descendants is great. About Schmidt I liked. The Election is very good. Downsizing doesn't exist. But maybe my two favorites will end up being the ones he didn't write.
Well, it makes for an interesting concept, right? Sometimes I like to see when a well-known writer and director, usually the same person, takes a step back from writing their own films and just focuses on the directorial element, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. It creates a different focal point, a different frame of reference. And I like when directors are willing to, and this is not always the case, but maybe let their ego aside a little bit and just focus on one particular element of their job.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are some filmmakers we've talked about, won't name names, that shouldn't be writing.
Yeah, and then there are some that'll never bother to do that. That'll always be writer and directors on their own films, like a Quentin Tarantino or a Paul Thomas Anderson. But that's part of their ethos, right? Like those are two figures I would never want to see break away from that norm, because that's kind of like that's their MO, right?
Yeah.
But some directors, I think, not that they need to, but I think it would be a creative decision to maybe change it up a little bit, change the dynamic just a bit.
I agree. I agree. It's always really intriguing. So The Holdovers one I'm very much looking forward to as well. I know we're getting low on time, so I'm just going to go through a couple of films here real fast. I'm not really going to get into these, but just to name some others, Rustin and The Color Purple, I think look really good.
Coleman Domingo looks great in both of them.
Yes, absolutely. He's going to have a really great year, I think. Paul Mescal, we have to mention, and Saoirse Ronan in a movie called Foe. Them together? Are you kidding me? Unbelievable. Wim Wenders has a new film out called Perfect Days that I'm really looking forward to, and it was just announced today or yesterday that it's Japan's selection for the Oscars this year.
Yeah.
Wildcat, speaking of Ethan Hawke, we mentioned him earlier. Yeah. He has a film out with his daughter called Wildcat. What else? There's Fingernails with Jesse Buckley, which could be interesting. Looking forward to that one as well. El Conde, we didn't mention earlier. May, December. Is that still coming out?
From what I understand, Todd Haynes' film. I believe that is still coming out. They did just release a teaser for it, and it looks really intriguing.
Anatomy of a Fall. I can't remember if we mentioned that earlier.
We didn't mention that earlier, but that's a big one, just given the popularity of that one. I think that's going to be perhaps the biggest contender when it comes down to best foreign language film this year. I think that's perhaps... it feels like that one is the one to beat right now.
Yeah. There's been a lot of talk about that one. Really looking forward to that. Also looking forward to, so I guess maybe if we're moving away from non-festival films, The Creator looks interesting to me.
You know, I had that on my list. I feel like if there's one film that's going to surprise people, it's probably going to be that one.
Yeah,
there's
I'm getting
something
more
about
excited
it
for
that
it.
I think it's just going to surprise people. I can't put my finger on what it is. Maybe it's the visual grandness of it, but I don't know. Something about
I'm
it.
really
I think
hoping.
is gonna.
I'm
Yeah, I
hoping you're
really.
right. Yeah.
I'm with you, man. I really hope it. I want Gareth Edwards to have a real winner.
I agree. I completely agree. So I'm definitely rooting for that movie and looking forward to it. Ridley Scott's Napoleon. It's Ridley Scott, so who knows? But
Okay, you know, me and my cynical self when it comes to trailers, once again getting my cynicism taken away from me. Another trailer I really liked. That
Okay,
Napoleon
well,
trailer, that
you
won
go.
me over.
yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that as well. The Iron Claw, I'm
Yeah.
intrigued by that, given the pathos that will come with that story.
Mhm.
We mentioned Next Goal Wins earlier. There's the Hunger Games prequel, which is interesting to me in the sense that we are getting another movie inside the world of the Hunger Games, which 10 years ago at this time was massive. Like, those films were huge hits. Now, this is a prequel. Obviously, Katniss is a part of this, but there really hasn't been much discussion around this film. I don't know if people are looking forward to this or not.
I don't know. I feel like all we really know about it, outside of the cast and the overall synopsis, we do know that Francis Lawrence is coming back to direct,
Yes.
and apparently the movie's almost 3 hours long.
Oh boy, that I did not know.
I think the movie is, at least according to IMDb, I think it was confirmed before, the movie is 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Wow. Does it really need to be 2 hours and 45 minutes?
Maybe what they're thinking is, okay, we have a near trilogy's worth of material here. We cannot fund a full trilogy. Just cram it all in one movie and get it out of here.
But is this, because the movie that I kept thinking of, especially with Lawrence coming back to direct, I could not help but think of something like David Yates in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, because Yates was great with the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
But those were obviously based on books. Fantastic Beasts and Where They Come From. See, I don't even know the name. That's how much
I'm not even going to correct you.
Movies.
That's amazing.
Look, I'm not editing that out. That is staying in the show.
No, that just goes to show the power that those films have. None.
I don't even know what I said, but we're going to leave it in because those movies, not good. And maybe that just heightens my point all the more, right? Because Yates was good with Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts, no good. But there was no novel for those stories to be based on. It was just J.K. writing a screenplay off of little bits that she had written previously, like little footnotes, essentially.
Yeah.
Is this, and again, I'm somewhat genuinely asking because I don't really know. But
This
if Lawrence
is a separate
coming
novel.
back. Is
This
it
is a
just
separate-
like?
This is a separate novel. So
Okay, so there is a novel.
there is a novel
Okay.
by Suzanne Collins called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Okay. See, that's the one thing I wasn't sure. I didn't know if this was a Fantastic Beast situation where they're just making things up based off previous lore.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now. It was published in 2020, so it's a very
So it's a new novel.
it's a very maybe this gets into our conversation that we had on our
I was
latest
just gonna
Patreon
say.
content. Is this reminiscent of what Hollywood forced Michael Crichton to do with The Lost World or Thomas Harris to do with Hannibal?
Yeah.
Write a sequel to your very popular novel that we just adapted, so then we can adapt your
Put it into
sequel
a
novel
movie.
into a movie.
Yeah, maybe that's what this is. Another Hannibal.
Yeah. Well, I think you're onto something because when I saw the marketing for this specific movie, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I was getting Fantastic Beasts vibes from it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was what I wasn't sure because I haven't read the Hunger Games novels. I didn't know if this was based off of a book. And I'm glad to hear that you clarified that because I wasn't entirely sure, or if this was going to be a Fantastic Beast situation. But at least there is a novel that there's material that the film can cling on to, and maybe that
Right.
makes sense of why it's 2 hours and 45 minutes, because
Yeah.
there's going to be that much material in a novel. But still, though, I don't. Either way, I think it's interesting that no one is really talking about it. As huge as those movies were 10 years ago.
Yeah. And as literally huge as this movie is,
Yeah.
2 hours and 45 minutes. I mean, God.
Wow. But it might be good. Who knows? I don't
Well,
know.
I'm pulling for it. I'm not being cynical about
Yeah.
the film. I'm honestly not looking forward to it because I just feel like enough time has passed that I've kind of lost the Hunger Games like connection, if that makes sense. I feel like if this movie came out 5 years ago, it would have been better off.
I agree. It
um,
might be a little bit too late.
Yeah, but then again, the novel was published in 2020, so
So,
I understand
maybe.
the timing of that not being possible to say I
Yeah.
wish it came out 5 years ago, but I mean
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Speaking of cynicism, The Exorcist Believer.
Screw that movie.
Not looking forward to it.
No. Okay, I'm gonna bring my cynicism back in when it comes to movie trailers. That movie trailer is terrible.
It's not good.
It's not.
I
I
agree.
mean,
The
there's
marketing on the whole is
there's nothing about what I saw in the marketing for that movie that differentiates itself from every other Exorcist knockoff film that we've got over the
Yeah.
past couple of decades. There's nothing different about it. Like
I
you look
agree.
at that trailer and compare it to something as forgettable as like The Devil Inside or something like that. There is nothing to separate itself outside of just seeing Ellen Burstyn once again.
Yeah. That's it. It's like it's an Exorcist knockoff that somehow
Is an
tricked Ellen
Exorcist film.
Burstyn to being in the movie. Yeah.
Oh,
So very
no.
strange. The last one on my list is a little comedy called Self-Reliant. And the reason I briefly mention this is because it is directed by Jake Johnson. Now, I love Jake Johnson.
that's interesting. Yeah.
As a comedian, I love Jake Johnson. As a filmmaker, I don't know. It's a huge question mark. And this film might be bad.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'm such a fan of Jake Johnson that I am very open and willing to giving this a chance. And so I'm excited for it. We'll see what happens.
I didn't even know about this one, so thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, that's why we do this.
That's why we do this.
To talk about it a little bit more. Are any other films you want to mention real fast before we wind down here?
I mean, the last one I had on my list was Naiad, the swimming film
yes.
with
Yeah.
Annette Bening and Jodie Foster, directed by the same duo who gave us Maru and Free Solo, the Rescue documentary that was eventually adapted into 13 Lives from Ron Howard. So this is their first effort in making narrative feature films as opposed to documentary films, but it's a story that seems very much in their, adventurous wheelhouse, right? And I mean
Yes.
that in a literal way. So, and I've heard some pretty good things about the film being a very like crowd pleasing sports drama of sorts, swimming sports drama of sorts. About the woman that swam was it the English Channel? Was that what it was?
Something like that.
I am
yeah.
getting my history all screwed up
Yeah.
here, but
I'm not sure.
yeah. But needless to say, it's one I've heard some pretty good things about and had on my list too.
Yeah, so looking forward to all of those movies. Let us know what movies you're looking forward to. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Of course, hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment here on the video. As we wind down, a couple of quick plugs here real quick. Reviews. So we will have a new review for Bottoms coming out very soon. Be on the lookout for that. Of course, if you missed our reviews last week for Gran Turismo and Passages, please go and check that out. It was a really great time. Women in Session, their latest episode is up. They talked about the movies of 1939, so no small task there.
Not at all. Wow.
Simply talking about some of the best movies ever made, one of the best movie years. So definitely go and check that out. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the show here on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you listen to the show. Be sure to subscribe. Leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Brendan, anything before we get out of here, my friend?
I'm just glad I made it through this. I can't tell if listeners are able to notice my voice being as bad as it is. Just got back from a wedding. I mean, I'm getting married this year, and I'm in 2 other weddings this year. It's a time to get married. We talked about at the beginning of the show, JD, fall being our favorite season. Apparently, it's also the time for weddings, and got many of them planned, including my own. But yeah, it was just outside Pittsburgh over the past weekend for one of my good friends from college. Congrats to Mike and Kim. And man, that drained me. I felt a little sick over the past couple days, but I'm feeling a little better. Thankfully.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. I think you did a great job of getting through this with incredible vigor, my friend.
Yeah, you don't have to downsize co-host, so that's good.
Don't have to. Exactly. With all of that said, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Oh, Jeff Nichols is back. I'm so excited.
College football.